Hi, I'm Ross from Airsoft, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Maxim Defense PDX-SD and MDX-510. So Maxim Defense has released two brand new replicas to the market, their PDX-SD and their MDX-510. These replicas are both similar as well as very different in their own rights, and we'll go over all of the similarities and differences with these two models in a second. If you get the AEG version, you're going to be getting a VFC gearbox installed. However, we also have an HPA drop-in version ready for sale as well. This has the gearbox shell with none of the internals, and it also comes with a grip already removed from the replica, ready for an HPA install. And I'll go over kind of the process of installing an HPA as I did it to this one here in front of me. But to talk about the externals of these two replicas, because that is really the bread and butter of this review. These externals are beautiful. Completely licensed by Maxim Defense, these come with a URG upper receiver, which sits higher than your typical AAR, similar to that of a 416. You're gonna have a CNC'd M-lock handguards on these guys as well. It is much larger than your typical handguard, kind of matching that 416 style that we talked about with the upper receiver. On the PDX, we have a 5.5-inch handguard, and on the MDX, we have a 10-inch handguard. Built into these handguards on the left and right are a nice QD sling attachment as well. Now, threaded on these replicas, it is 14mm negative thread, so if you want to replace your orange tip and place anything on there, you do have that option. Now, on the PDX-SD, it comes with this suppressor built on. Part of the reason for that is because that is where your battery is stored. There is a little slip in the bottom, which is where your wiring fits in, and your battery sits up in here. Your inner barrel also goes all the way to the end of the mock suppressor. So you do not really have much room for replacing this for another option. If you decide to rewire it, HPA it, and wire it to the grip, something of that sort, you may be able to do that. But the PDX-SD is built to use the suppressor it comes with, not another version. Whereas the MDX-510 is kind of more so designed to put your own suppressor on there and have it kind of flush inside this rail right out of the box. So just some key differences there is with the handguard length and the suppressor that comes on the PDX-SD. That is a very main difference between the visual aesthetic of the two. The other main difference that I briefly mentioned is going to be your rear stock cap. So on the PDX-SD, you have a very short one, whereas on the MDX-510, it is a bit longer. And the reason for that is because the 510 holds your battery in the rear rather than in the front suppressor. So it is wired differently in this guy, which gives you a little bit of a different configuration. It's also going to allow for different modifications and build outs however you decide to customize your replica. So just something to keep in mind is that the PDX-SD is front wired and the MDX-510 is rear wired. And to speak briefly on the wiring in these, they are wired to DINs right out of the box, and you do have ample battery room in the suppressor. It's a bit of a tight fit in the buffer tube, but nothing that a good battery can't fix. One last thing I will say about the suppressor is that the orange tip is removable and it comes with a replacement one in the box. However, it is relatively difficult to take off. It is glued on there, so just be prepared to use a heat gun and a wrench to really remove it properly and clean up those threads inside there so you have no problems in the future. Now, we have an ambidextrous charging handle as well as an ambidextrous selector switch. Your magazine release is right side only. And then you do have a functioning bolt catch. All the way on the back here, we have a plate for a QD sling, as well as your collapsible stocks, which have multiple positions and can be kind of customized to how you would like to run your replica. And then the pistol grip you get with these are the BCM Gunfighter pistol grips. Included in the box is a magazine, a speed loader, and a small little hand stop for your M-lock as well. So as I said, with the Maxim Defense rifles, if you pick up an AEG version, the internals are going to be manufactured by VFC. So you're going to be getting a VFC gearbox inside of these. They also come with a gate Aster programmable MOSFET installed already. So this guy is ready to go out of the box as an AEG, and it performs very well. Another great feature these guys have is their quick change system. So right out of the back of the gearbox, you can pop out your spring and swap it out, no problem at all. It is another great feature that I think all Airsoft replicas should have. Now, one of the more interesting things that I find about these replicas is the inner barrel length. On the PDX-SD, we have a 305mm inner barrel, whereas on the MDX-510, we have a 275mm inner barrel. So the inner barrel is actually shorter on your longer railed version, and the reason for that is because your inner barrel goes all the way to the end of your suppressor on the PDX-SD. So it's just something to keep in mind if you are looking for a longer barreled version. technically the PDX-SD is that version, despite it being the smaller gun out of the two. So just something to keep in mind. I will say though that if you add a suppressor onto the end of this barrel and you extend your inner barrel, you can obviously make it go a lot further, but just straight out of the box, that is the difference between the inner barrels of these two. This one is gonna have a longer inner barrel. One other small little gripe that I will say I have with these guys, it's not that much of a big deal, but with the anodization on these replicas, and I've seen it with similar replicas in the past, they do tend to mar very easily. They get scratches and kind of leave marks on them very, very easily if you kind of knock them over, bump into things, anything of that sort. They are not quite as resilient externally as I would like. That is not to say that they will break. They are built very well and they are very strong. They'll take a lot of hits. They just might not look as pretty in the long term. So it is just something to keep in mind when getting a replica. If it's something that you're really trying to keep clean and unscratched, you might have a hard time with this one, as it's just prone to happening with this kind of anodization and style. So now that I've kind of given the overview of these replicas, I want to get into the actual building of one. So we can go into the tech room and you guys can watch as I install a Polarstar jack into this PDX-SD. So we take our Maxim defense box, we can open it up, and this is our HPA drop-in ready version. So as I said, it comes without the grip attached, it comes without any gears inside, and just the gearbox shell. I've already kind of taken it out of the bag here, but as you can see, that is what it comes with. You also have all the other little odds and ends, the attachment pieces, as well as a speed loader and your hand stop. So inside this little bag here is all the screws you need for your safeties and your bolt catch and magazine release, as well as your grip. So all of the parts you need to install come with the gun. So first step is to take your body and to separate your upper receiver from your lower receiver. Then I went ahead and removed my inner barrel. And then obviously removing the gearbox from the lower. Then I removed all of those pesky little screws keeping the gearbox together. Split it open, removed my trigger, placed in the Polarstar trigger board. Screwed that down, and then I am using a speed trigger. I put an amped IGL onto this jack, and then I'm just gonna set that guy in there. Gonna wire it together, making sure none of the wires are pinching or overlapping anything too important. And then I'm gonna keep this guy front wired, and I am going to run the IGL right out of the grip as per usual. One thing I will note is that the spring guide in the back actually locks into the body of the replica. So I ended up removing this from the gearbox and then reinstalling it once the gearbox was back into the lower of the replica, and it sat really nice and kind of helped it hold the gearbox secure into the body. So that is just a little note I had about that piece there. And then I decided to hook it up to air real quick just to test. And then I am installing this little piece on the side of the gearbox, which is actually a part of our bolt release. And then I'm gonna put our safety selector switch back on there. Now, this is probably the most difficult part of the entire build, as it is an ambidextrous safety and selector switch, as well as I am working with a Polarstar jack, which in my personal experience has never really worked super well with an ambidextrous safety. So this did take a little bit of time. I ended up having to uninstall the build out of the replica and rework the safety, but that was the only problem that I had consistently, was getting that safety lined up properly. And at the end of the day, I did get it. I have a working safety, a semi, and a full auto. Now, hand in hand with putting the safety together is gonna be obviously putting your gearbox into the lower, and then I'm just gonna throw my grip onto my replica here. Now, with our amped IGL, it was a little bit of a tight fit, so I dremeled out a bit of the BCM grip to make sure that I had ample room and wasn't squeezing anything in there. And then I also drilled out the bottom cap for the grip and then put the IGL running through that as well to hold it kind of in place down there. And then I reattached my bolt catch as well as my magazine release and put all of the pins back into place. Now, This part was not necessarily difficult, it was more so annoying. Having to feed the wire in through the front of the receiver, up through the handguard, and then into the suppressor as well was definitely a little bit of a pain. So a little tip I'll give while working with this, which I found out the hard way, is that with the wire harness that I'm currently using, the standard Polarstar wire harness, you are not able to get the upper receiver off without unwiring it through the suppressor. So all the way at the end there, you do have a slot that your wire harness goes into the suppressor at. And if you are going to remove this, it's going to have to come back through that, which isn't a big deal, but you are going to have to use some sort of tool to kind of feed it back through whenever you are reinstalling it back together. It is not as easy as having it wired to the rear and being able to just slide your upper receiver off, because that wiring is going through there. So it is just something to keep in mind. Now, another big thing to note is that since you are wiring it up front, you are going to have that wire kind of go through your mag well, so making sure everything's tucked and out of the way so you are not pinching or slamming a magazine into there every time you reload your rifle is going to be important. So just keep these things in mind. As I said, the selector switch was a problem for me, but at the end of the day, I did get it functioning and working properly. So just keep that in mind. It can work. But that's really all there is to it. I did a bit of nozzle alignment. I programmed my FCU, and this thing was shooting really, really nice. I was very impressed with how it performed, considering it is just a jack and honestly a quick, less than 30-minute install. All right, so now that we've built our PDX-SD with a Polarstar jack installed, I'm gonna take it out to Three Rivers Paintball and try it out on the field. Now, of course, this isn't gonna give you guys a great example of how the internals of the AEG are working. However, I am using the stock barrel and hop-up, so you can get a pretty decent feeling for the performance while outdoors with the shorter but also longer inner barreled version of this replica, which I think as an outdoor gun performed very well despite being this kind of PDW build. So let me know what you guys think by checking out this footage from Three Rivers Paintball this past weekend.
I'll hit him when I hit him.
Really that color under the ring.
Hey, cool.
There's no way.
The 100 caliber steel.
Reloading.
Let that bunker in front of us.
Can we do that next one?
Yeah, you can. I'm gonna start pushing up.
Oh my goodness.
Nice job.
Good job.
There's this guy. We want you here. Yeah, right here, like right.
My bad, man. They're all the way by the prison. Hit! All right, and that is my review of the Maxim Defense PDX-SD and MDX-510. Let me know what you guys think of these really interesting replicas, if it's something that you would carry out on the field, if it's something that you're interested in running. I think that they are built really well. I think they feel really good in the hands. I think that they are a beast on the field. So I would love to know what you guys think of these replicas. Feel free to let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.